You are just about to join the Sweaty Thoughts Book Club. Aren't you excited? Welcome to the Time Treadmill. I'm Ron, and these are my sweaty thoughts about Doctor Who. Yeah, Doctor Who, giant crabs, base under siege. I'll get to all that in a minute. But first, let me tell you about a book I got for Christmas in 1981. Back when I was 13 years old, for a Christmas present from a kind of a distant, married-in relative who didn't know me very well, but she knew I liked to read. Well, she got me for Christmas a book, and she had no idea what she was getting. She literally just walked into a bookstore, went to the science fiction section, and found a book with an interesting cover. That book turned out to be Grotto of the Formigans by Daniel de Cruz. Great book. I loved it. It's your basic people discover a deep hidden underground civilization of weird, basically alien creatures and have an adventure. Awesome stuff. Highly recommended. So it turned out not long after that, Daniel de Cruz released another science fiction book, The Eyes of Texas, which is basically a near-future story where Texas secedes from the Union and defends North America from a Russian invasion. It made sense at the time. Anyway, that went on to become a series of 4 books that were all moderately successful in the era. It certainly did well enough for the publisher, even though I'm betting you've never heard of them. Around that same time frame, Daniel de Cruz also wrote a couple other novels. One of them was F Cubed, which is about the release of an experimental pheromone that has interesting side effects. I'm not going to tell you what F Cubed stands for. And then he also wrote my single favorite time travel book. And you want to talk about a Doctor Who link? This is totally a Doctor Who-ish kind of story about time travel, about a young, lazy, fake composer college student, it's hard to explain, who works part-time cleaning the shop of a scientist who discovers a method of time travel, and the kid uses the time traveling device to go back in time, kidnap Franz Schubert, take him deep into the future, and then there's a competing scientist, and there's love interests, and every section of the book has a different pair of characters mixing and matching throughout the story. It's just this brilliant, convoluted plot line, and I love it. Highly recommended. If you can find it, I'm sure all of these are long out of print, but if you can find them, I so love these. Now, I tell you all of that to tell you this. Before Daniel de Cruz was a science fiction author in the 80s and early 90s, he started out first as a nonfiction author. His first book was called Boot, and it was all about Marine boot camp. And it's a really interesting book. Bearing in mind that was written in the late 60s, early 70s, so it's talking about boot camp in the era of the Vietnam conflict. Fascinating stuff. The other thing he was doing at that time was he was writing just potboiler fiction stories, action stories, the kind of stuff that Gold Eagle books would have been all over a decade later. And so of those, and I promise I'm getting to a point and I'll get to Doctor Who in a minute. Of those, he had a couple of different series. The first one was the Kill series. So you had Double Kill, Deep Kill, Sky Kill, Fire Kill. And they're all about an ex-con who was wrongfully convicted of murder, and then stuff happens. And he goes on various adventures and he clears people who were also wrongly convicted. Great action stories. The other series he did, the Finesse series, which are books like The Landfall Finesse, The Pipe Dream Finesse, those are equally good, and those feature a lead character named Ape Swain, giant hirsute gorilla of a man who goes on different adventures and things like that. All of which brings me to this book right here, The Captive City. This book won an Edgar Award, and it features Ape Swain again as the lead character, and the entire setup of the book, the titular Captive City, is an American city in the Middle East that has been walled off from the rest of the world for 15 years. It was a oil drilling facility, and the local company offered the workers and their families ungodly amounts of money to stay and live there in this city and stay cut off from the rest of the world. So the story is set about 15 years into that, and Ape Swain is hired to infiltrate this city and find out what's going on. And there's so many twists and turns and action and adventure. And one of the most memorable things of the city is what he discovers is that the children of the city are being raised and trained to be naturalized Americans with all the American behavior and consume all of the American entertainment, but they are also being secretly trained as janissaries, as fighters for this local warlord, faux Rakistan government, whatever it is. And the way that Ape Swain figures this out is he's observing these teenagers from a distance as they're being trained, and he can see them talking to each other. He sees them saying the same phrase over and over again. He's watching through binoculars. From reading their lips, it seems like they're saying this nonsensical phrase, which is, "Oh, bacon troll." Okay? And it's less obvious when you're reading it than when I say it out loud, because what he finally figures out is what they're saying is, "Obey control." And in this case, control is a mysterious faceless figure that they're being taught to obey. And they're being taught to obey control without question, without dissent, without giving it a second thought. They just do whatever control tells them. Now, all of that finally brings me back to Doctor Who and the Macra Terror. You see, the recurring key thing in this story, like I said yesterday, this is a base under siege story in which the base does not know it's under siege, because all of the occupants of the city are under constant hypnotic control with the aid of this gas that's being pumped into their living space. And they're being indoctrinated to obey control. And every time control has something to say, it's like a big brother kind of TV monitor, and the face of control comes up and issues commands. Although notably, the face that comes up is a photograph, and then there's spoken words with control speaking, saying, "Do this, do that, obey control." And everybody obeys control. Except, as you may have figured out, control is actually a room full of giant sentient crabs. Just crabs the size of a Winnebago that are sentient and using this base, this human population, to pump this gas from the bowels of the earth and bring it up to the surface to make livable conditions for the crabs. And eventually the crabs plan on overthrowing humanity and flooding the entire planet with this breathable gas. So, of course, the Doctor figures out what's going on, and there's twists and turns, and ultimately the crabs are defeated. Hooray! And control is revealed to be a mirage, a deep, dark secret. It's a pay no attention to the crab behind the curtain sort of situation. This is a great story. I mean, you would think, Lord knows, way back when I first heard the concept of the Macra Terror, a story in which the Doctor faces off against sentient giant crabs, and I saw the picture of the crabs, I was like, oh, this is trash. I expected this one to be a certain kind of thing, the same way I expected the Web Planet in the first Doctor era to be a certain kind of thing. And I went into it with extreme skepticism. And just like with Web Planet, which I now adore, it's probably my second favorite first Doctor story after Marco Polo. With this one, the Macra Terror turns out to be this really great psychological terror, claustrophobic kind of story. And I will grant you that I am sure that the effects for the crabs at the time were not the least bit convincing. All we have now are photographs and audio recordings, but you can tell. It just was not, it was papier-mâché monsters. But realized here in this restoration with animation, the crabs look terrifying and just absolutely dominating, and it totally works. I love this story. So I'm here to tell you, if you're on the market to pick up some classic Doctor Who stuff, definitely pick out this new-ish, it's been out in the last year, Macra Terror animated reconstruction. It is top notch. I love it. And that'll wrap it up for today. Tomorrow I start in on the faceless ones, and I'll tell you more about it tomorrow, but my big disappointment is that the faceless ones has also just gotten a full animated reconstruction, and it's just been released in the UK. It has not been released in the US yet, which means what I'm going to be watching for the next 3 days are the loose cannon reconstructions for 4 episodes, and then the 2 existing episodes that are still in the BBC archives. And I won't get to experience this animated reconstruction yet. I have it pre-ordered. It doesn't have a US release date. So whenever it does eventually come out, assuming the entire world doesn't descend into chaos and terror, I will have it and I will rewatch it then. But like I say, that's going to wrap it up for today. I will see you tomorrow. Stay safe, stay at home, and I will talk to you then.